So good afternoon. Welcome to the panel, Building a Business Case in the Media Industry. So my name is Irmgarda Kasinskaite-Buddeberg. I'm advisor for communication information at UNESCO, coming from UNESCO headquarters in Paris. And in this panel, we will hear from our experts today and media professionals how to create a strong and compelling business case for the inclusion of persons with disabilities, from audiences to media professionals in media industry. So let's meet our speakers. Emily Flores, the founder from Cripple Media from United States of America. Lukas Burnar on my right side, Executive Director, Andererseits, Austria. And on my left, Nicholas Hurd, Creative Advocacy Coordinator from the Arts International Canada. So I would like to give them 1 minute to introduce themselves. Emily, you are the first one to go. 1 minute.
Sure. So my name is Emily. I'm a journalist and founder and editor-in-chief of Cripple Media, the first ever media platform that's run by and run for young disabled people. We focus on creating news and media content that celebrates disability culture and take back the narratives of disabled people and media.
Lukas, now it's your turn.
So my name is Lukas. I am a young white man wearing a suit, and I am not a journalist. I am the executive director and co-founder of Andererseits. We're a magazine for disability and society based here in Vienna. And on our staff, we have journalists with and without disabilities. Around 60% of our team lives with disabilities.
And then give a floor to Nick.
Hello, my name is Nicholas Hurd. I'm a white male with clear glasses, brown hair. I have a gray, charcoal gray suit and a green tie. And I work with Flores Canada, and I do other projects with Flores International.
So before we give the floor to our speakers and we will go into the discussion, I would like just to give you a little bit of update why we are meeting today. And first of all, I would like to thank the organizers for this opportunity, because this is the third time in a row that the Zero Project Conference brings together us to talk about how media could be more inclusive, diverse, and equitable to everyone. And this year, our focus of the panel discussion will be how to explore business opportunities for media professionals with disabilities. And before I give the floor and I will address a few questions to Emily, I would like as well to take this opportunity to share a little bit of information why UNESCO is involved in promoting of disability equality in media. So I hope that you will see my few slides. So why we are here, media is an important in everybody's life, as it is able to shape public perceptions and attitudes and behaviors of all citizens, including persons with disabilities. And by promoting different views, voices, and inclusive narratives, media would contribute to the creation of a more equitable and inclusive society. However, it is very often what media is not including disability in the overall coverage and do not provide accessible media content on information or services in formats which would be accessible for persons with disabilities. And it is very seldom that, unfortunately, media professionals with disabilities are included at equal level with the rest of the industry. So this is why it is important that we would address those issues in a more comprehensive manner, and as well invite media professionals to portray persons with disabilities in a full diversity, and not only limit the attention to more specific disability-related events like initiatives, programs, sports events, and so on, and to make sure that accessible media features are included in every single media resource or feature or story. And it has, obviously, if it is not done in a proper manner, this has long consequences, because persons with disabilities have to be seen as more diverse in terms of different occupations, interest, and not only as a homogeneous group. So last year, on the occasion of international event, which probably you all know, Paris Paralympic Games, UNESCO released two important resources, training materials for media professionals. And the first one, what you can see on the screen, is Practical Manual on Disability Equality in Media, which is now available in English, Mongolian, Ukrainian, and very soon will be available in French, Spanish, Arabic, and Russian. And the second resource was released as well to facilitate those who don't want to read long and lengthy documents. These are the masterclass video series on the same subject, introducing subject in 2 minutes. So I invite you to check our YouTube channel and enjoy those masterclasses together with Sophie Morgan. So why it is important to have them and disseminate to media professionals? Because those materials provide practical recommendations how to conduct self-assessment on disability-related issues in 3 areas. First one, we invite all editors, reporters, journalists who create stories every day to take into account that editorial content and policies have to be equitable and inclusive for persons with disabilities. Secondly, we invite technical teams which produce materials, audio, video, or digital materials that we would respect or would be designed taking into account information and web accessibility standards, that we would be accessible to the viewers, to the audiences who use assistive devices to access those resources. And the third one is we invite managers, executives in particular of media industry, human resource managers, to apply inclusive management practices and support every single media professional with disabilities, what he or she would be able to participate and work and contribute to the in media industry. So these are the 3 areas what we will cover during our discussion today. And now I would like to move to Emily. And before I give her floor, I would like just to say a few more things about her. I think she was very generous with her introduction. With all of them, I had an opportunity to speak on the phone. So this is why I would like to share additional information, what I've learned about each of them. And Emily had created a platform where Gen Z creatives can share their perspectives and share their narratives. And beyond Cripple Media, she's as well a journalist, a future journalist who's studying journalism studies at University of Texas and conducts research on computational propaganda. And just to let you know as well, but her writings have been featured in Teens Vogue, MS Magazine, Women in News, and more. So, Emily, welcome to the panel.
Thank
so my
you.
first question is to you. As a representative of Gen Z, you are reshaping the media landscape, and you are demanding more inclusivity and accountability from media organizations. So how has your professional journey evolved from being a user, consumer of media content, and someone who moved from teenager's time to more professional experience and becoming actually a manager, a founder of the Cripple Media, being responsible for financial and human resources. So please tell us a little bit how you evolved professionally.
Yes, of course. So, so I think as far as for kind of, how I started, Cripple Media. So I started when I was about like 15, so I was still in high school. And, at the time, I think I was starting out in journalism, and I started to notice that, like a lot of the things in the world, not just disability related, but media seem to view disability as a black and white lens, like something that was either, horrifically bad or extraordinarily good. And I'm sure everyone can attest to this, that disability is neither that or this. It's a lived experience, that's so much more nuanced and complex than that. And so I started Cripple Media in order to kind of be able to give that agency and that power back to disabled people themselves. And I think, coming from more of a Gen Z lens and kind of also being a passive consumer to different types of media and to the internet, it's definitely interesting for sure, because I think the digital, the current digital reality that we're currently in is not exactly safe for disabled people right now, I would say. Where we're currently at with media is that I think that there is a huge, unfortunately, several forces at play in which, there's a destruction of freedom of the press right now. With so much, information coming in, that I think that it makes it hard for people to determine, whether, what is real news or what is not. And so that then kind of, leads into an environment that is not exactly safe for disabled people online, especially as, social media, content moderation kind of becoming AI, and then, also the reducing of social media fact-checking. It's becoming more of an unsafe environment for disabled people online. So it's interesting because I really think that, it's Gen Z is kind of a force to be reckoned with, because I think we really, have a power to really question outdated social norms, but we're also creating an environment where, it's kind of contradicting that at this moment. But anyway, I think kind of, to that point, to be able to create a space where we're able to, take agency in our own stories, take agency in the media narratives about the disability experience is even more important now than ever. So I think now, transitioning from a Gen Z consumer to a founder and then a manager is definitely a lot of hats to juggle with, but something that I think hopefully a lot of, leaders who are not disabled could, maybe, take away from is that, accessibility and inclusivity really ends up benefiting everyone. And that's truly true in every sense of the word. So something that, we've been really finding out recently is that, how to build a truly accessible work environment for everybody. And that's kind of harder than it looks. Everybody has, different access needs, everybody has different, disabilities and et cetera. So how do we move away from, rigid structures? And I think one way that we could do that is actually just liberating ourselves from that and building stuff that, doesn't have to be so rigid. So it could look like, running an environment where, we operate on, clear communication, mutual trust, and things that are not operating on urgency culture, things like that. So it's definitely been a learning process for sure, but I think, the through line of it all is that, accessibility really benefits everyone, and when you invest in it, you are able to see productivity, happier work-life balance, et cetera, drive upwards.
Wonderful. Let me pick up on financial opportunities. As we speak about media industry, obviously, everything comes together with financial investments. So do you think that media industry in general, whether it would be public media or private media in particular, are those companies missing something by not investing in authentic disability representation? And how does Cripple Media address this issue?
Yes, absolutely. So companies that fail to invest in authentic disability representation are actually leaving billions of dollars on the table. This was actually a statistic or a study done by Caroline Casey's Valuable 500, in which the global disability market represents $13 trillion in annual disposable income. So that represents, not only disabled people, but it also represents their family, friends, and allies. So when you really think about that, that's not only billions of dollars, but it's $13 trillion, $13 trillion. So it's so much more than we can ever really imagine. So, that really just goes to show how powerful that untapped market is. And so when you don't, invest in authentic disability representation, it doesn't really become about, not doing necessarily the quote unquote right thing, but it's actually, just a missed opportunity in making more money. And so the way that Cripple Media kind of challenges that gap is by, ensuring that, not just letting disabled people tell their own stories, but also ensuring disabled people are the ones leading, creating, and profiting off of their own stories. So the way that we do this is that we have, brands and platforms to create content for disabled audiences by disabled creators. So kind of, handing that agency back to them. And, obviously while also ensuring that narratives are resonating with a broader audience as well. And so by doing both of those things at the same time, it's a win-win situation for everybody.
Wonderful. As we are attending Zero Project Conference, which is the second day of a conference, we have heard so many other presentations about artificial intelligence, and you kind of talk a little bit of fact-checking and having more safe and inclusive environment for people with disabilities accessing media content. Tell us a little bit, how do you see your generation reshaping disability representation and digital economy? And maybe you could share some examples how artificial intelligence, AI-based solutions, what do we mean for viewers and as well owners, founders of media organizations, those who introduce the content to audiences with disabilities. Do this technology shape the impact users with disabilities, and what is the future in the media landscape?
Yes, yeah, that's a great question. So specifically this topic I'm very passionate about because I actually have a background, I used to be a researcher in computational propaganda, which is essentially a very fancy term to say we used to research the way that, information is used to manipulate the public opinion. So that is very, very often used specifically online and social media. So I think, going back to what I was talking about earlier is that I think just being a Gen Z passive observer is like, not only am I able to, or was I observing these things, but I'm also, passively consuming all of these things and, actively falling for fake news or fake misinformation all the time. Anyway, but what does this have to do with disability? Well, it actually ends up harming disabled people online all the time, actually. So the way that this happens is that, current tech conglomerates operate on kind of the basis of surveillance capitalism. So what that means is that they, privatize your attention and your data. So what's happening is that most often, these algorithms are tending to favor, pieces of content that are designed to evoke emotions rather than deliver news, whether that's factual or not. So because of, that happening, a lot of people are, losing trust in the press, are losing the ability to know what is, journalism and what is not. And so, all of these factors are leading to, social media fact-checking no longer needing to be in use because people, question them, people don't use them, etc. So the destruction of social media fact-checking, the destruction of people-driven content moderation, often, unfortunately, allows for, the spreading of misinformation, the spreading of harassment towards disabled people online. So, again, while Gen Z is a generation that, we see inclusivity as a baseline, not as a bonus anymore. We're also, unfortunately, living in a digital current reality where it kind of seems contradictory to do so. And in comment sections, the proliferation of the harassment of disabled people, unfortunately, is existing.
Thank you very much, Emily. These are very important issues. As we speak about media industry and looking for business opportunities, the mainstream advertisement. I think you work quite a lot. This is what I've learned during our discussions. Many brands still approach disability representation through a very much, let's say, limited approach of what we would call it media frames, which are related more to charity or inspirational lens. And this is very present in mainstream advertisement. So what do you think, what needs to change in order to make mainstream advertisement more inclusive advertisement? And if you have any experience or recent collaborations with media institutions, branding organizations, public relations, and so on, and what you would recommend for media advertisement to become more inclusive?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think one of the biggest, problems with, current mainstream media is that they tend to speak about the disability community, but they don't speak to them. So the way that happens is that, they fall into this, charity or inspirational, traps that you mentioned. And that's part of the problem, unfortunately. There's a huge online disability community that is filled with so much diversity, filled with so much culture in the disability community. And unfortunately, that's not being tapped into. So part of what we do at Cripple Media is not only to, to publish news and to really, introduce disability culture into mainstream media, but we actually also have a B2B side where we kind of partner with corporate clients or, other types of clients in order to, help them with their campaign or project in order to speak directly to the disability community. So one really cool project that we were able to do was with a client that was AT&T, and this was a couple years ago where they were developing the first ever accessible TV remote. And when this was happening, it was pretty exciting at the time because this was, the first ever of its kind, and they were specifically, wondering how to adjust its language so that they could make sure that they were speaking to the disability community, which is a very, specific subtlety that maybe not a lot of people pay attention to, is that I think language holds so much power. And it indelibly, shapes the way that we view and talk to people. So, being able to, advise on that and being able to, advise on what language is best in order to, nod to disability culture was really an honor, and also just goes to show when you build, relationships with disabled consumers, disabled experts, and really nurture that and have long-lasting relationships with them, it benefits monetarily in the long run.
Wonderful, really inspiring answers. Emily, thank you very much.
Thank
we
you.
will still continue. So before I move to the second speaker, I would like the technical team would switch on still on the screen the 7th slide of my presentation, because I want to share a few examples from Africa, Asia, and Europe before we move to Lukas. So the next slide, please. So as you have heard, we release few resources for media practitioners around the world, and those resources are used now in different parts of the world to inviting media professionals to adopt them. And here it is one of example which we shared with a number of media representatives who attended the African Media Convention in Ghana last year. And during this gathering, we trained executives of public service broadcasters and community media from Africa. And it was a very interesting experience for us because it was the first time where we introduced the manual to the executives, but we as well wanted to hear how do we see this being introduced in media industry. And let's not forget that public service broadcasters, these are those who are responsible to ensure public interest, to convey the public views or public interest. And if they media coverage is not inclusive enough, it is difficult to expect what diverse views would be represented to this broader society. So here it was a very interesting experience for us, where we introduced disability equality within a big conference, and we had as well very specific capacity building workshops with a number of host institutions. The work still continues in Zambia and Tanzania this year. And the next example is from Ukraine. And I had an opportunity to travel last October to Ukraine, to Kiev. We've invited again a number of media organizations coming from central areas, and those who actually provide inclusive and I would say very, very crucial coverage from frontline areas. And this work was introduced during the very important, I would say, and as well well-attended 24 Donbas Media Forum, that brings together Ukrainian media. And during this time in Kiev, we were able actually to introduce disability equality and what are the important elements which needs to be taken into account when reporting on different aspects related to disability during the ongoing conflict. And we were very happy that in December, 3rd of December, we all know that this is International Day of Persons with Disabilities. Most of the media outlets who attended this workshop and were present during Donbas Media Forum followed up, and we released a number of news stories on people with disabilities in Ukraine. So that was really a successful case for us. We were very impressed how receptive media professionals were in Ukraine. And there is an Ukrainian version of manual translated and available to everyone who would like to use it. So I would stop here with PowerPoint for the time being, and now with this short introduction and few examples from Africa and Ukraine, I would like now to move to Lukas. Once again, I had a discussion with him on the phone, and I think he was as well very, I would say, modest in terms of what he presented in terms of his work. And what I would like to learn about your work, and I've heard as well, but you became quite famous with your work with investigative stories. And obviously, as a manager of a media outlet, you take into account as well information and web accessibility standards when you share information and you create a content. And as we are in Austria today, you as well comply to European Accessibility Directive, which came into power. So maybe you could share a little bit of experience how you address information and web accessibility standards while creating media content.
So at Andererseits, we have 3 core missions. One of them is to help people better understand disability. Those are, for example, people who have not thought of disability, who have not interacted a lot with people with disabilities because we live in such separate systems a lot of the time. Another mission is to empower journalists with disabilities by providing a way into the industry and by having equal collaboration. And then the third mission that we have is access to information. So if you bear in mind that around 1/3 of the German-speaking population need easy language, and you compare that to over 80% of information being published in very difficult or even complex language, then you see that there is a very big gap between the information that is desired by the audience and by readers and by what companies, organizations, and also media organizations publish. And so that third area is where the standards come in. Of course, there are a few frameworks that we also comply with. So that would be it's all based essentially on the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities and the European Accessibility Act. But what we realized is that those standards only cover a very small sliver of what you actually need to do as a media organization in order to be accessible. The European Accessibility Act, for example, gives very clear guidelines on what you need to do to make your website accessible to persons who use a screen reader. That's great. But beyond that, there are very few regulations that companies need to comply with, and there are very few standards. So we had to develop our own framework, and essentially every piece of media that we publish, we run against 3 tests. The first is, does it work for people with mobility needs? For example, we publish a print magazine, and we did a lot of user testing and realized that just turning the page can be a very difficult task. So there is always a digital version of what we publish. Then secondly, does it work for people with sensory needs? So there we have the standard of publishing on 2 different senses. So whatever we publish as a written document can also be read out aloud by a screen reader. And then thirdly, easy language. Does it work for people with intellectual disabilities? And that's the area where we need the most innovation and where we have the fewest standards.
Thank you very much. This is very important to take into account web accessibility standards and in production of media content. But coming back to the topic of our session, we'll look for business solutions. And one of the probably key areas is to demonstrate the financial benefits to the investors. And I would say your work is as well known as someone who introduced a lot of, or many different innovative practices in your organization. And before coming to this conference, I looked what are the other media outlets, what do we use to leverage the, let's say, advertisement solutions to increase the, the investment or financial benefits from different revenues and so on, and some really leverage this through introduction of new advertisement solutions, some really add more content-driven content, analytics, especially related to media monitoring, e-commerce, marketing. Some rely on subscriptions and memberships. So how do you demonstrate financial benefits as an organization or media outlet, specifically addressing the audience with disabilities to your investors?
So the great thing is that we don't have investors. We are mostly funded through our subscribers. We have around 80% of our revenue coming from around 2,500 paying subscribers. But getting to this point was the real challenge, because when we talk about media and disability, we have to confront 2 societal challenges at the same time. We have to talk about accessibility, we have to talk about inclusion in our processes, and then we also have to talk about the crisis that we have in media financing. If you look at Austria, for example, we have a very concentrated media market, we have a lot of small publications closing their doors, and we have a lot of dependency on institutional advertisers. And so we very quickly realized that we don't just need new editorial practices, but we also need a new way of financing. And we got there through a blended finance approach. The first 2 years, we were started in 2020, we worked with a team of 30, all on a volunteer basis. So our budget was 0. Through that work, we could build credibility, and we could then apply for a startup grant by the city of Vienna that allowed us to incorporate. Then the challenge was growing, because we didn't want to be dependent on convincing an investor. So we very quickly realized, okay, if we want to do investigative reporting in addition to inclusive reporting, we need our own revenues. So we went for a subscription model, a membership model. So it goes a bit beyond subscription. We have a community that is very active and that we, for example, also include in our investigations. But then a community doesn't just pop into existence. It takes a lot of work, and it takes time and money. And for us, it was then foundations and the crowdfunding that provided us with the capital to do this development, to go through this process. With foundations, we have always had a very clear pitch. Give us money once, we will create something that has never been published before. This will get attention, and then we can grow our own revenue sources. And we went through the cycle 2 or 3 times. We collaborated also a lot with established media organizations, but that was only possible later on when we already had a bit of credibility and a bit of stamina to go through a year-long negotiation, for example. And so we went from a volunteer basis to a project finance basis, working a lot with foundations. And now we have our main funding source, a B2C membership model. And slowly we're adding B2B revenue sources, which are advertising and workshops. We have created a lot of innovations, both in terms of accessible content, accessible communications, in how you can organize an inclusive newsroom, and in how you develop new products in a user-centered way that includes people with disabilities. Because user innovation is a great topic and it has great potential, but very often we run into danger of forgetting people with disabilities in those processes, and then the products that we create through all of these innovative processes again exclude people with disabilities. I think you can see it very well with AI. And so those are areas where we were able to create expertise that we're now systematizing, decoupling from media a bit, and sharing with other companies.
Thank you for sharing your business model. In the past, Andererseits has collaborated with well-known media organizations, and here I would refer to public service broadcasters in German-speaking countries. And you worked with them on investigative journalism, on capacity building, on content creation, promoting as well inclusive media and workplaces. So what are the benefits of those, I would call it, media collaborations with public service broadcasters in particular for you? Would you invite as well other media outlets to collaborate more or to establish more collaborative structures?
Absolutely. We founded Andererseits with the hope that someday we could dissolve ourselves because we transformed the media industry. We still have a way to go there. But these collaborations are a way of pushing the industry, at least nudging the industry forward a little bit. So they have an effect both on our organization and on the organizations that we collaborate with. For us, of course, it gives us a reach, which reinforces our own business model. So on the financial side, it makes sense. In the collaboration with ZDF that we published in December, we reached around 3 million people. But it also has an effect on the organizations that we collaborate with. And a lot of times when we collaborate with public broadcasters, they have a mission. They are mission-driven organizations because they have a public mandate. And they fail at this. And it's very seldomly said that directly, but if you compare, for example, the public broadcasters in the German-speaking countries to the UK, you can see in almost every metric that the public service broadcasters in Austria and Germany in particular have a long way to go. And the collaboration with us allows them to leapfrog the development a bit, learn from what we do, and get comfortable with the idea of creating inclusive teams that then are not just active in this one single area when they cover disability, but to really engage in a process that transforms the entire organization.
Thank you, Lukas, a lot for those answers. If there is an opportunity now to come back to the last slides of my presentation, so slide 9, I'll share with you the last example from Mongolia, which is a very interesting case because we organize a capacity building workshop. So this is the next slide, please. And we invited 5 media institutions, and I would say here what it is important to take into account, what we invited newsroom chief editors and managers. And during this time, we really worked a lot with them on creating inclusive content and adopting disability-sensitive reporting practices. And over 4 weeks after the workshop, we provided some kind of mentorship services, and those news rooms developed organizational action plans and tailored guidance to the media professionals, to the colleagues, how to introduce more respective reporting on people with disabilities issues. And afterwards, as a result, when new 15 pieces were developed with new content, which was produced and disseminated in Mongolian as a part of his workshop. So this work will continue in Bangladesh this year. So now, with that, I would like to turn to my left, to Nick, who is a creative advocacy coordinator. And I know what, again, short introduction was very short about you, and
Yes.
I really would like to say a few words. What Nick is a content creator, actor and host, and he appeared in many, many numerous TV shows and podcasts. And he, as well, someone who works behind the microphone. He worked as well as a creative consultant on Freebird, which is internationally acknowledged and known animated film starring a person with Down syndrome. And there are many other things which you probably could share with us working as advocacy coordinator at Ars Canada. So welcome to the panel. And my question is, we had a long, extensive discussion during our teleconference before coming to Vienna, and I have heard an interesting story and actually a very strong message what you wanted to convey and address to the employees, to media organizations and governments, requiring them to support disability representation. So maybe you could tell us a little bit what you would like to share with all of us here.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you for the opportunity. Thank you for that introduction. Wow, what an honor to be here at the Zero Project Conference. I feel fortunate to be part of this forum where we actively listen and learn from one another. We've come a long way from the days when people with disabilities were not seen or heard in a real and meaningful way. When I was a child, and that wasn't too long ago, my face was featured on posters for Down syndrome. I was literally a poster boy. I was labeled and described by other people, and not in a good way. Whenever my mother tried to research my identity, she came across labels like mongoloid or idiot. At the time, people with intellectual disabilities were often sent far away to institutions. They were put out of sight, out of mind. My mother was totally against that. She didn't let people's words define me. She let me define myself. So I learned to tell my story through paintings, illustrations, theater, podcasts, and videos. My unique lived experiences from my unique identity. I am a proud gay man with Down syndrome. Pretty unique, right? Yes, disability and sexuality is a thing. Disability also comes with creativity and problem solving. We know how to bounce back. We can be fashionable and funny. Just ask anyone who knows me. Mine is only one story among many others that need to be seen and heard. As a proud Canadian, I can tell you that we've come a long way. I see more people with disabilities in front of and behind the mic. In Canada, we have a network called AMI TV. The programs are created by people with disabilities, about people with disabilities. Canada also has a national disability screen office. The DSO works to improve representation of people with disabilities. We also have the Accessible Canada Act that requires accessibility. We have made progress, but we can't sit back and celebrate. Not yet. We have more work ahead, especially when it comes to representing people with intellectual disabilities. Here's how we can start. Lead with, not for. What do I mean by that? Look at me. I'm here talking to all of you. It's not someone else without a disability speaking about me. I am using my voice, shaped by my own experiences. I created this presentation. Large Canada believes in me and my ability to contribute. They gave me support and professional training. They commit time and resources to help me create my presentations and everything I do. The investment is paying off. I'm killing it, right? This is what it looks like. This is what it looks like to lead with, not for. When we create opportunities for people with disabilities to take the lead, we make viable contributions. So I urge employers, media outlets, and organizations to invest in us, not just with words, but with actions. Hire people with intellectual disabilities. Provide paid opportunities with training and coaching. That is how we build the next generations of storytellers. That's how we nurture innovation. It took me many years to build confidence and skills to share my voice. And now I mentor a younger generation to share their stories. We are change makers. It's a powerful role. Let's be real. We need to move forward. We cannot go backwards and back into the Stone Ages. We don't need other people to speak for us, to speak with us. We cannot let them mold the world according to their narrow perspective. Give us the tools and the platforms to tell our own stories and do awesome and powerful work. The world needs it. Thank you.
Nick, thank you for this very powerful message. And knowing what you as well disability advocate, and I know what you were involved in many, many campaigns, what is the most, let's say, impressive or your most proud activity where you were involved? Maybe you could share a little bit of from your advocacy work.
Okay. I will respond to that question like this. First of all, recognize the talent of people with intellectual disabilities. Include us. Make sure we are part of the decision-making process. Also invest in talent development. Dedicate the time and resources to expand our knowledge. I mentioned Launch Canada as one example. They made a bold and smart move by getting me professional development and coaching, just as they would offer training and speaking opportunities to someone without an intellectual disability. And that's why I'm here today. This shows leadership in disability inclusion and authentic representation. I want to stress another point I made earlier, because I can't say it enough. Give us paid opportunities. Don't expect us to volunteer, because our time is as precious as everyone else's. And I would argue that our time is even more limited because of the extra time we spend constantly proving ourselves over and over again. There are other factors we have to manage, like disability poverty. So paid opportunities are critical. Invest the time and resources to develop people with disabilities. You need our unique contributions and our unique voices. Our work strengthens your work.
Thank you very much, Nick, for this very inspiring answer to my question. And I know that we left 2 minutes only, and the last question is what you would say to all young media producers, journalists,
Wow.
activists with disabilities who would like to join you and promote disability equality in media industry. What would be your last words? What would be your advice? Where to start?
Thank you for that question. I will answer something like this from my own experience. When I can tell my own story, I tell my truth. I share my lived experiences. I shatter myths. I break barriers. This is why it's important to lead with, not for. People with disabilities, I'll say it in a different way, and you've all heard it before. Nothing about us without us. This is how we have authentic disability representation in the media and the rest of the world.
Wonderful. Emily, the same question goes to you. What you would recommend to the youngsters who are getting ready to establish the media outlet, release a new product? What is your advice?
Yeah, I would tell media producers to really invest in disability leadership and stay adaptable to the digital current realities.
And Lukas, what you would say?
Be soft on people but hard on systems. It's going to be a very frustrating experience, and realizing this and having this approach gives you a bit more endurance.
Thank you a lot. Big, wonderful intervention, wonderful answers from Emily and Lukas. I thank you all for being here today with us, and I hope that you will learn still a lot during the conference today and tomorrow. Thank you.
I'm trying to, I think my mic is still on. Thank you so much. Thank you, I appreciate it.
Are you more comfortable if you take